U.S. President Donald Trump says he's no longer interested in holding talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Speaking in Scotland, Trump said he was very disappointed with Moscow over its continued strikes inside Ukraine, despite his numerous phone conversations with Putin. He also said he would reduce the 50-day deadline he gave Putin to reach a peace deal before imposing a new round of tariffs on Russia.
I'm going to make a new deadline of about 10 or 12 days from today. There's no reason in waiting. There's no reason in waiting. It's 50 days. I want to be generous, but we just don't see any progress being made.
Let's get more on this from William Courtney. He's an Adjunct Senior Fellow at RAND, a think tank, and he's also a former U.S. ambassador to Kazakhstan and Georgia, as well as the U.S. Soviet Commission. Good to have you with us. What can we deduce from Trump's decision on this deadline?
Well, a couple of things. Trump earlier said that he wondered whether Putin was playing him, stringing him along, because Putin refused to accept the 30-day ceasefire that President Trump proposed. Putin's refused any serious negotiations in Istanbul on the Ukraine war. And as Trump himself has said, after he has a pleasant conversation with Putin, then Putin bombs civilian targets in Ukraine. So there's a certain amount of frustration, I think, that President Trump is now feeling.
Among what he's talked about is imposing secondary sanctions, which is threatened, which would hit countries like India and China. Could that push these other countries to influence Moscow to change its position?
It may have some impact. China and India are by far the two largest purchasers of Russian oil. So secondary tariffs on those countries, those could have some significant impact.
Does this all reflect some kind of shift in Trump's overall foreign policy?
Well, that's an interesting question. So what we've seen very recently is President Trump went along with President Netanyahu's bombings of nuclear infrastructure in Iran, and the U.S. carried out an extraordinarily successful attack, which has really had a devastating impact on the targets. And then we have seen the sort of today, for example, Trump talking about real starvation in Gaza, countering what Netanyahu has said. And so I think to some extent we're seeing President Trump act what we would call a bit more presidential, more like the leader of a great power, feeling that Iran, Putin, Netanyahu, maybe that all three have taken the U.S. For granted. So he's acting in a more assertive way across the board.
On this deadline issue, would this be enough to bring the war in Ukraine to an end?
It may not be, because what we have seen thus far is that the size of Russia's war economy, the extraordinary number of soldiers who have been taken into the fight, the Russian soldiers, and the extraordinary casualties, deaths and wounded, suggests that the Kremlin is really determined to continue the war in Ukraine. And certainly Russia has given no indication that it wants to negotiate to find an off-ramp, if you will.
Okay, we'll leave it there for now. William Courtney, Senior Fellow at the RAND think tank. Thank you very much for your time and insights.
You're quite welcome.
I asked DW's Misha Komadovsky in Washington what prompted Trump to bring this deadline forward right now.
Well, as we know, President Trump was hoping to end Russia's war in Ukraine within 24 hours of starting his second term. And obviously, it's a bold promise that hasn't been fulfilled. And he called for a swift ceasefire. But as the saying goes, it takes two to tango, and in this case, even three. So far, Vladimir Putin has shown no willingness to stop the fighting. And President Trump has often said that he knows both President Zelenskyy and President Putin very well, and now he claims he'll shorten the 50-day ultimatum he previously gave Russia to just 10 to 12 days because, as he puts it, he knows what's going to happen. In fact, when I asked him just before his departure to Scotland, what would it take to bring Putin to the table with him and Zelensky, he replied, "It is going to happen, and it should have happened 3 months ago." President Zelensky showed up in Turkey in May, as we remember, ready for a possible one-on-one meeting with Putin, but actually Putin was the one who never showed up.
And is the thinking in Washington that as a result of this action, Putin will return to the negotiating table, or what exactly are they looking at?
Well, the mood in the administration has evidently grown more skeptical amid continued Russian attacks and a lack of meaningful signals from the Kremlin. President Trump's recent comments, and I quote, "I'm not so interested in talking anymore," suggests growing impatience on his end, especially as his earlier calls for a quick ceasefire have gone unanswered. When asked if Putin lied to him about Ukraine, President Trump replied, "I don't want to use the word lying." He said talks with Russia had been productive at times with 3 near breakthroughs on a ceasefire, but missiles keep flying into Kyiv, he added, expressing frustration over repeated escalations.
So if Trump is frustrated and, can't talk anymore, what action will he actually take when the deadline runs out?
Well, it's all about tariffs here. President Trump warned he would impose severe tariffs on Russia if a peace deal isn't reached by early September. Let's remember, when the U.S. president first announced tariffs as a tool, Russia wasn't on the list. And some experts argued that that was because Russia isn't a major U.S. trade partner, especially now, 3 years into its full-scale war with Ukraine. Others suggested Trump was keeping tariffs as a strategic move, something he could play later, and now might be the moment for that. The current plan includes potential secondary sanctions aimed at Russia's trading partners. Trump said a formal announcement could come later on Monday or on Tuesday. And while direct sanctions have already hurt Russia, secondary measures go after the countries and companies helping Moscow. This could lead to more isolation, less money for the war, and a weaker economy. It's worth noting, though, that the current sanctions on Russia were specifically designed to hit its economy hard and in turn slow down, if not halt its war machine. But Russia's economy has clearly adapted to this new reality. We'll have to wait and see how tough these new measures turn out to be for Russia, should they be imposed.
DW's Misha Komadovsky in Washington. We appreciate your reporting. Thank you.